Well, I think magic is the fact that I was sitting here having this conversation with you, staring at the Mind Beyond Death book. And then you said, this great book, Mind Beyond Death.
This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity. This is Synchronicity.
Welcome to episode 48 of Synchronicity. My guest this week is the lovely Kelly MacLean from a equally lovely and amazing podcast, the Tao of Comedy, which is on MindPod Network. We'll talk about Kelly in just a second. You know the deal. You know how we go. Good news alert. Good news alert. Book giveaway is back this week. As you heard in the beginning, and I think I've already actually given this book away, but it's so good. I'm still reading it. So good. Really taking my time with it. I'm giving away a copy of Mind Beyond Death by Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoche, who Kelly has actually met. Really just one of the best books I think I've ever read on anything. If you're interested in death, dying, bardo states, dreaming, meditation, what's the meaning of life, what's a Buddha, all of these things, you're gonna love this book. So how do you get this book? For those who don't know, you join the Synchronicity community. You go to syncpodcast.com, syncpodcast.com, and you sign up for the Synchronicity community. There's a little pop-up. Oh, no, a pop-up. It's okay. It's going to be okay. You sign up for there's a pop-up. There's something on the side. It's basically you join my little email community here. I send out an email once a week about the episode, about what's going on, sometimes some cool stuff like some Alan Watts talks, stuff like that. And then you're entered in the book giveaway contest, which I think I'm going to make a monthly thing. I spoke about before how it was costing me a pretty penny to send them out every week. So I think it's going to be a monthly thing, but still, pretty good deal. Okay, that's done with. Let's talk about some interesting things that are going on. First one, Pokemon Go. Now, my cohort at MindPod Network, Zach Leary, I don't know which episode it's in. It was from a few back, maybe like 5 or 6 back. He was railing against Pokemon Go. And he was saying no to the Pokemon Go. It's making us people looking at our phones when we're supposed to be out in the world interacting and doing things. I'm all for that. I love interacting with people out in the world sometimes. But am I addicted to Pokemon Go? I'm spending money on this thing, and I am not someone who spends money on mobile gaming, but I love it. I gotta catch them all. I was at the farmer's market on Sunday and basically battling a little child, no more than 7 or 8 years old at the farmer's market because I was trying to train my Pokemon. I got a pretty good Snorlax. Need some more candy. Really great game. I think this is a precursor to some cool augmented reality and VR stuff that's going to be coming. I'm no expert in that stuff, but I do think it's cool. And I think I've seen and met, granted, mostly children, but I've met people out in the world playing Pokemon, and everyone seems genuinely pleasant and happy. Okay, so I like Pokemon Go. There you go. Exactly. What you going to do about it? Tell me why I'm wrong. Another thing that I'm into, one of my favorite shows. It's on Netflix. You can watch it from the beginning. Star Trek: The Next Generation. Some people may tell you the original Star Trek is better. There's some Deep Space Nine fans. Voyager if you're a weirdo. But to me, my money is on Star Trek: The Next Generation. No one better than Jean-Luc Picard. No one better than Data, Worf, Geordi, you name it. There's so many awesome people on Star Trek: The Next Generation. First 2 seasons, a little rough, especially when they replace, Gates McFadden, the wonderful Beverly Crusher, with Pulaski. She's not so great. And who likes Pulaski? If you're a Pulaski fan, come on, that's crazy. But anyway, I love Star Trek: The Next Generation. You may think it's nerdy. You may think it's not that cool. You may think it's kind of boring and dated. It's not. It's awesome. It still holds up. One of the best shows. So many philosophical ideas. it's not a utopia because there's, you got the Borg, you got all this crazy shit going on, but the Federation is a cool thing and it stands for unity among people and races. So I'm not going to go on off a whole tangent, but check it out. It's on Netflix. You might like it. All right, last thing. And the smallest subsection of people relate to this, what I'm about to say. But the Miami Dolphins, my favorite sports team. Sports, to me, I consider Miami Dolphins my biggest spiritual practice is being a Miami Dolphins fan. It is a tortured existence. We're 0-2, lost tough games. You notice how I say we, too. I consider myself part of the team because I am delusional. But we're 0-2. We lost to Seattle on the road, tough game at the beginning. We then lost to the Patriots on the road. Lots of home cooking for them. Don't get it twisted. We hurt their quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo. Sorry, get well soon. But this week, we're playing the Cleveland Browns. I am guaranteeing a Miami Dolphins victory. Guaranteeing. I guarantee it. I'm granted we're playing their third-string quarterback, and their best receiver, rookie receiver, just got hurt, Corey Coleman. But we're going to Womp City on them. So that has nothing to do with this podcast, but I realized I started this last year I think it was in like late October. By then the Dolphins were totally out of it, which is not uncommon. To only be a few weeks in the season, be out of it. So like I didn't want to talk about it. But now like hope rings eternal, right? Springs eternal. Rings eternal, springs eternal, whatever. Miami Dolphins. I love them. So without further ado, let's get to Kelly. Not to the episode, to Kelly. Kelly is fucking awesome. A good friend of the podcast and MindPod Network, Duncan Trussell, called me up one day. Duncan doesn't always call me. We'll get exchange texts once in a while, but rarely do we call each other. But he called me and he said, hey, I just met this person. She's really awesome. She's got a podcast called the Tao of Comedy where she's interviewing comedians about really like deep spiritual topics. Her parents were students of Chogyam Trungpa. I think you should talk to her. So we set up a call, Kelly and I, and it was an awesome conversation. It was like immediately like, yeah, let me check out your episode. I'll tell you what's up. Listen to the first episode of the podcast, which was Barry Katz, a legendary comedy agent. And it was amazing. Just like immediately hooked. I got it. It's great. I was like, please join MindPod Network, whatever that means. I would like to have you be a part of it. And so she was. And immediately just super appreciative, really nice person. And I've gotten to know her through her podcast and especially in this conversation. And she's just she's wise and pleasant and real. So one of the things we talk about in this podcast is the unifying factor for a lot of the people on MindPod Network, because there's a diverse group of people. We're not all talking about the same stuff or even from the same perspectives, but the unifying factor is that I think we all really, really give a shit about each other and the world, and we care. That's the one quality. We really care. And I like to think that everyone involved is just an excellent person, and they are. So This episode is really great. It's a little longer than usual, so you know it's good. We didn't even clip it. Kelly does this awesome thing at the end of her podcast where she asks these people like really point blank questions like, what is God? What happens after we die? What's love? What's magic? Which are really like, not the easiest questions to answer. So I flip it on her towards the end of this one, and she gives amazing answers. We talk about meditation, how we don't always do it. There's a point in here. I forget exactly where it happens, but I was so excited with the conversation, I lose my train of thought while talking. So you will hear me babble on. I don't think I come to a coherent point. It's about something about being present in the here and now, but I lost my train of thought because I was so excited about the conversation. So it's a testament to Kelly and just how fun this was. So that's my little spiel on this episode. Thank you to everyone who has rated and reviewed Synchronicity on your favorite podcast platforms. It means so much to me. I love reading them. It really makes me happy. And thank you to everyone who's donated. Patrick, also hero of the podcast, Patrick, as I call him. Thank you, buddy, for doing what you do every month. That's really fucking cool. So, yes. Now, without further ado, here is Kelly MacLean.
Hey, Noah.
Hey, Kelly, what's going on? I'm going to turn my video off.
Okay.
Nice to meet you. I just spoke to...
I'll turn mine on for a second.
Okay, yeah, let's do that,
You
just
can
for
see
bandwidth.
me. Yeah. Ooh. Oh,
Hey,
thanks
how you
for
doing?
hi. Good. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm glad we're not actually doing a video podcast because I just woke up not.
Yeah, I just spoke to your mom, Carrie, who I found
So
out you are
funny.
named after her twin sister, Kelly. So that's
I am. No, you talk about synchronicity. My mom and I are like so intertwined. It's very difficult for us to extricate ourselves from each other. And so this is true of my PayPal account. Somehow comes up as Kelly MacLean sometimes.
oh, that's fun.
Which is a good way for my mom to sneak me money without my phone. Why did you? Because you PayPal'd yourself.
That's awesome.
But then also with our Skype, we've been trying for years, and I don't know why, but
It must be in like the settings somewhere because I know what's going on. It's when someone calls the audio, it's going to their phone, and it's just like
it must be because I think I had used Skype on her phone a number of times. Her Skype wasn't working, so she would use my account, and then I don't know.
It's really funny.
Enmeshment, yeah.
She's extremely lovely, though.
Oh, sweet. Yeah. She is.
Cool.
Should we turn off our video?
Yeah, let's turn off the video for the bandwidth.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Awesome. Thank you for coming on, by the way.
Of course, it's my great pleasure. And also, speaking of synchronicity, we've been trying to make it happen, and somehow it all came together this week.
I know.
Just after the big eclipse, and I think it's a very, I don't know if you're into astrology, but it's a very auspicious time astrologically.
Okay, so here's the deal with astrology, and we'll just consider this started. I am very much into it. I've gotten actually Vedic astrological readings, a couple of them a few years ago, and I love it. My dad is super duper into astrology.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Usually it's the mom.
Yeah, no, he does like natal charts, like when my son was born, who we may hear crying because he's down for a nap, and those are pretty shaky. He did a natal chart for him. Like he's really like into it, and I would say like he's into it to a level that's past like kind of like the pop astrology stuff. And my mom is actually, she's not like a huge astrology person, but she is into Tibetan astrology.
Oh, cool. I've never
Me neither.
learned much about that, but my mom is also starting to learn about it, and it's kind of fascinating.
So tell me what's going on this week with the astrology?
Okay, well, there were two eclipses that happened, one at the beginning of September and one that happened on Friday.
Oh, cool.
And they're in Virgo Pisces. And so they say that eclipses are moments in time where you might look back and go, oh, that was a turning point. Things weren't quite the same after that. Or especially if you're very connected to it, you might say, oh, that, like, my whole life looks different 6 months later after that moment. So that's going on. But then also the 26th, I believe, a week from today or a little less, is the luckiest day of the year. So Jupiter, the planet of luck, the most benefic planet, comes into conjunction, meaning it's in the same spot in the sky from our perspective as the sun.
Oh, wow. Well, I love this stuff. So I'm a Cancer is my sign. And
oh, sweet.
I have always, what are you?
I'm a Pisces. I'm a fellow water baby.
My dad is a Pisces. We love
all that sort of
woo-woo, unconscious.
Yeah,
exactly. I definitely gravitate towards it. And I always notice this weird thing. I'm not like totally in touch with the lunar cycles or astrology, but whenever there's a full moon, normally my typical behavior, if I didn't have a child and a job that I have to wake up for, I would stay up all night. That's like my regular behavior. But I've been going to sleep earlier because I have to do this stuff. But whenever there's a full moon or anything weird going on with the moon, I can't go to sleep. And I'm always like, that's so weird. And then I'll inevitably check to see if it's a full moon, and it always is. I'll be up to like 3-4 in the morning. So like I put a ton of stock into the positioning of the planets and the stars and how this stuff. How did you get into astrology?
Well, first of all, I totally agree. And the Cancers are the most sensitive to the moon because that's your ruling.
Right.
You're ruled by the moon.
Right.
And actually, and maybe your wife could tell us if this is true or not, but Cancers, they tend to be a little moody sometimes.
Yeah, she would definitely agree with that. That would be the nicest way of saying it.
And they say that as the moon changes signs every 2.5 days, so changes the mood of a Cancer. So my mom is married to a Cancer, and if he is in like a negative space, being a grump, she will say, "I'm just avoiding Hector until the moon leaves Scorpio."
Smart. I got to tell my wife. She'll be thrilled if she has a tip to deal with my horrible moodiness.
Yeah, she has a calendar, and then she'll start to notice, oh, he's always a dick when it's in Aries.
Yeah.
But I got into astrology through my mother, and her mother was kind of into the occult back in the day. She was an alchemist.
Cool.
And she taught that and tarot cards and some other, actually she did like some psychic training with my mother where she would, as kids, she would show her kids like different piles of cards, and then the kids would have to guess which one is
I love
triangle.
it.
Yeah, and my mom was really the one who was really good at it, and she was a little bit trained in that. And you know what? She actually does have a lot of like weird psychic moments.
It's no surprise that I actually called her by accident.
Yeah, totally. She was calling you. So she got me into it as a kid, but especially when I was about 12, going through puberty, it became a way to sort of look at people and look at my own mind and say, okay, who am I? Who are they? And that's really what I see astrology as, like a language, one perspective of looking at one way to talk about your mind or somebody else's mind or your connection with somebody.
No, that's like a really awesome way of putting it too, because I think when people think about astrology, I think it's especially devalued in today's culture because it's, you know, the stuff you get in the paper or in the magazines, you know, the pop astrology. People like to think, well, okay, well, this is going on, or I'm a Cancer, I'm like this, that's how it is, this is what it is. And it's like, well, how could that possibly be? How do they know everything? Rather than it's a lens that you can look through to see a certain coloring or shading of what's going on within your own self and then also in, you know, the external world. I think that's huge that you put it like that too, because I think that gets lost a lot.
Well, I like how you put it, a lens, because it's not fact or fiction, you know, it's just one language. So my best friend Genevieve got really into astrology at the same time, and to this day, you know, when a guy comes into her life or someone who comes into, a friend comes along or a friend's baby is born, we immediately look at the chart and we talk about them, and it's become this way for us to, you know, express thoughts about that person and perceptions about them. Well, and you know, gossip.
Of course, that's what it. That gossip is a necessary part of life. I'm with it. I was looking today. I typically stay out of the pop culture gossip news, but I did see that Jennifer Aniston is getting a divorce, and also Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. Jeez.
But Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt are getting a divorce like every month.
That's what I saw it in.
Because I've seen it so many times. And also Jennifer Aniston gossip. Like if all the gossip about her that you read on the cover of magazines was true, like Jennifer Aniston would have like 4,800 babies.
No, that is true.
She's always pregnant.
I look, every time I go to the supermarket, I look at the tabloids, and I swear I've never seen anyone more pregnant than her. Ever.
I know, and she never looks it to me.
No, look at this bump. It's like, nope, she looks really thin and in shape.
She had half a taco, and now she's pregnant.
So
what do you think it is about Jennifer Aniston, though? Like, she endured as like this person in the tabloids, and also just like clearly that's because people still care. Whereas like you're not seeing Courtney Cox or really anyone.
And she had and she actually had weird stuff go down with her. I mean, the thing is like I tweeted today. I like I said, it's rare that I actually delve into the pop culture in this world. I used to love it. I used to eat that stuff up. I used to love it. I blogged about the Real Housewives. Like, oh, trust me, I've been there, done that. Oh, yeah.
I want to hear your mindful blog about the Real Housewives.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. Like, I think I realized early on, like that the reason I loved the Housewives show so much is that it was like kind of like a judging zone that was condoned. So you can look at these people who are clearly going through various problems like in life. It's not like they have their shit together. That's not what the show's about. Like they're always fighting. It's some horrible thing. And you can be like, oh, look at them. Oh, can you believe what Vicky did? Can you believe what Tamara did this week? And, you know, I realized that like that's probably not the healthiest way to spend my time if that's what I'm getting out of it. You know, if I'm helping in some way or I think I can add something valuable to this, which is why I try to stay away from pop culture stuff, but I inevitably get sucked back in because I don't think I'm going to be in the cave in the Himalayas somewhere. I think the way into this stuff, which we'll get to with your podcast and this and kind of I think into the world is the way to go. So I do like to stay aware of what's going on. Same thing with politics. But back to the Jennifer Aniston thing. I mean, I tweeted today that she seems really nice. That's all. That's my only observation of Jennifer Aniston. I don't know her. I've never met her. She seems incredibly pleasant when I've seen her interviewed or talking. And like she has been like totally taken to task in the tabloid. So I don't really know anything about it, but I hope she's doing well because she seems very nice.
That's sweet. Yeah, I agree. You always see her doing, you know, like fundraisers for kids with cancer and things like that. And then, you know, she just seems to be out there being a good person, and people can't help but kind of rip her to shreds sometimes.
It's unfortunate. Okay, so I want to segue into what you're doing with your podcast, the Tao of Comedy, which a little history for people who are listening. Duncan called me one day, and Duncan doesn't call me all the time. And he was like, hey, I met this girl. She's really awesome. She's got this podcast. It's called the Tao of Comedy. Her parents studied with Chogyam Trungpa. I'm like, holy shit, this sounds really cool. So I was like, okay, yeah, definitely link us up. And we spoke and we had a great conversation and we were like totally on the same page about all this stuff. And I was like, okay, definitely want you to come on to MindPod Network. This group of people, we're kind of going through this transition period where there's all these like Dharma teachers, but now we're going a little bit younger and trying to go into different explorations of stuff more in the world. And since then, it's just been awesome. It's really, really been awesome listening to your podcast and just nodding my head along with all of the people, what it is for people who don't know. And it's on MindPod Network. All the links will be there to listen to it. Kelly, basically, you interview comedians, not always, there's some outliers, but comedians who really are bringing something special to comedy. And I think we're in a comedy renaissance. I've spoken about this before. I've had this podcast. I've had it's nuts. It's totally nuts. And I love it so much. I've had 4 or 5 comedians on this podcast just because I think comedy and spirituality, or whatever you want to call it, are inextricably linked together. I think that's a huge part of it. So what you're doing is like right there in like the intersection of two things I'm extremely passionate about. And you're doing it in a way that isn't like, it's not from this elevated stance of, you know, well, let's intellectually look at how these things go together. It's a playfulness about it. And your skill as an interviewer and talking to these people is just, it's awesome. So tell me about the Tao of Comedy.
Well, first of all, thank you. That's all very sweet. And sometimes as a podcaster, you know, you don't know how much, you're like, are people just automatically downloading that? Like, who's actually listening? So it means a lot. Thank you. And it's been so great to be on MindPod Network. I just think it's brilliant to have a mindfulness podcast network that isn't so serious like you're saying, you know, it could be. But so it came about, the idea came about in Montreal at the Just for Laughs Comedy Festival, which is the biggest comedy festival in the world. It's speaking of Renaissance, it's a Renaissance fair for comedy right in the magical city of Montreal. And so I was there for the first time, not this summer, but the year before. And it really started, I think, with a chat I had with Patton Oswalt really briefly on the red carpet. I interviewed him for something I was writing. And then he came and sat next to me at the bar, which was like, you know, one of the bigger honors that had ever happened to me. And I was like, you know, I played it cool. And we ended up chatting a little bit. And the things he said in the little interview, which I do have on as a mini podcast on iTunes, but I don't have the conversation that followed, which was really amazing. And just the way that Patton Oswalt looks at the world, I think is really with heightened intelligence and scrutiny and so much heart. The reason he has looked so deeply into what he thinks the nature of the world is, and society and the way that we function, is because he really cares. And he uses the skillful means. I mean, we could talk about like prajna and upaya, skillful means, and, you know, clear seeing, insight. He has this insight, and then his skillful means of delivering that insight is through comedy.
Yeah.
which I think is really fascinating and unique.
Yes.
And I think all comedians do this to varying levels.
Agreed,
Because
yes.
I think if it's funny, it has to have some ring of truth to it. There has to be some recognition of one's own experience or mind to go, oh, yeah.
That's
I mean,
right.
you literally get a recognition laugh. You'll be like, you know, I always, when my shoelace is starting to fray, and someone will be like, ha, great shoelace. You know, it doesn't even have to be funny. And as
Right.
a comedian, sometimes you get those surprise laughs. Where
Aren't
you just,
those interesting?
Yeah.
I noticed those happen quite a bit when psychedelics are in play. When you're just laughing at, you don't even know what. Sometimes someone will say something and it wasn't particularly funny, especially if you think about it, you realize it really wasn't funny at all. But the way it was delivered or what happened, something happened there that was hilarious. I know exactly what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Oh, totally. I mean, I'll come up with dream jokes, like probably almost every night. I'll like half wake up and I'll be like, I gotta write this shit down. It's so funny. And there have been a couple of times, like Paul McCartney moment. I think the song
Yep.
Yesterday came to him in a dream.
Yep.
I have had a couple of moments like that where a truly good joke came out of that. But like 99.9% of the time, I wake up and I'm like, what the fuck? Is this, like
Yeah.
Himalayan camel toe? Like, what does that mean? I don't get it. Or like the other morning, I was like just laughing and laughing in the dream state, saying love in the time of Sephora to myself. I have no idea. I wrote that down. No idea what that's about, but it's not going in the act. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
So, yeah, it's very interesting how humor bends too. It's like things can be so funny to you in the dream state or the drug or alcohol state,
Right.
which is why there's often a 2-drink minimum at a comedy club, that when, you know, in another context may not be humorous at all.
Right. Well,
But
yeah.
anyway, so I had this great conversation with Patton Oswalt, and I also had a great conversation with Barry Katz, who I felt really saw to my soul. And he was the first guest. And he is basically like one of the greatest comedy moguls of our time. He created Last Comic Standing, and he's managed or represented or produced basically everyone from, you know, Jon Stewart to Dave Chappelle and literally everyone.
Yeah.
So he and I had this great talk and set up a meeting in LA a couple months later. And of all the ideas I pitched him, this was the one that he really did a double take to and was like, you need to do that. And then 3 days later, my brother died very suddenly in a car accident. So I had decided to do this. And then that whole thing got put on pause. But as I re-entered my life, I found myself really drawn to this search of like, you know, it morphed into this hungry search for answers or meaning or, you know, even just really heart-to-heart connections at a time where I was so cracked open that,
Right.
you know, people don't really want to talk about death and that sort of thing. So I think subconsciously I was craving, you know, a space to really process and explore.
Yeah.
And the people I wanted to do that with were comedians. So that was not my original intention quite so much, but it became, you know, it was a little more cerebral of an idea when I came up with it. And then it became really a heart level thing. So about, I don't know, 6 months after he died, I started recording the Tao of Comedy podcast, and Barry Katz was my first guest. And it's actually really become a grief project where, you know, I get to feel like I'm physically doing something to relate with the passing of my brother and honor him. And, you know, now it's also like time has passed. It's more than only a grief project, but that's definitely a big part of it.
Yeah.
And it's been really fun because who better to talk to about the biggest, heaviest things than comedians who always end up putting a twist of, you know, a little Cheshire cat smile on it.
Yeah. I mean, I thank you for that amazing kind of nutshell what the podcast is. And it's so much is in the podcast too. And everything you're describing, from being a project to actually being a grief project, it just shines through. And I think what you've encountered is something that I've been encountering with podcasting. You bring who you are into that. And if you're open-hearted, whether because there's some tragic event happened or that's naturally what you gravitate towards or you've had experiences, it's just something that kind of infuses the conversations for people who, there's a lot of different types of podcasts out there, obviously. Like, you
Absolutely.
listen to a Reply All, they're more whimsically investigating like mysteries and things that are going on. But one of the things that I think I always try to figure out, like, what is MindPod Network? Who are these group of people? Why is this thing exist? And the common trait I know, the one thing I see in everyone who's a part of it is they're just genuinely awesome, open-hearted, and kind people. No one is a part of it who's not like that. They all are doing this, whether it's for a personal reason, whether it's people, I admire that you've been able to also walk the path of grief so publicly in a way that it's clearly like I've heard the interview with Barry, which is one of the best podcasts I've ever heard. I think I texted you like right after. I'm like, holy shit, this is incredible, because I didn't really know the backstory of what happened with your brother or anything. And I was just like blown away, not only at your openness, but also that the conversation that was emerging from it, what you were getting out of Barry and in subsequent guests as well. Like, you're really exploring deep concepts. And that's before you even get to the questions at the end of your podcast, which are like, very heavy stuff. And I also love, like you said, you're doing this with comedians who inevitably have a humorous or funny take on something, but they also, like you said, that prajna wisdom, they have this ability to really see clearly at times and put that clarity on themselves, out to the world in varying degrees. And I think that's one of the things that kind of irks me about spirituality at various times. And there's Chogyam Trungpa, who we got to talk about, but he was very acutely interested in pointing out what, spiritual materialism, what he referred to, and exoticizing something and, getting off onto, essentially making it an ego trip, spirituality.
Yes.
And I think,
which we see so prevalently, every Whole Foods and every yoga studio, and, all the places that are popping up here in LA. Like, there's one called Unplugged, which is you pay $33, you sit for 30 minutes, and you leave. It's like the Chipotle of spirituality. It's like, okay, got it. Now I'm going to go.
That's a crazy business plan. I know someone, listen to this. I knew someone who was working with a teacher who would record energy CDs and charge like thousands of dollars for these. So she would record silence onto a CD, charge them $1,000, and send them to that person and saying, here's healing energy on this CD. Listen to this CD of nothing. And like, this woman was making like hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
Oh my God. That's like financial survival of the fittest. Like, if you explain that.
What the hell?
Oh my God. That is like snake oil and a half.
Oh, I've never, I was like, you're joking. I was like, you're fucking with me. And this, I know this person. I trusted this person. She wasn't making it up. She was like her assistant, her web helper. It was nuts. But what I was saying is like this, what happens when you get very spiritually materialistic, and I don't want to say this as though I've never engaged in this. Like, if anyone who's on a spiritual path, the tendency is to go there sometimes. Oh my God, it's this, whatever it is. But what happens is people can get really rigid, dogmatic, and inflexible when they identify with something, rather than I don't want to say the correct approach, but a lightness about you, a levity, really allows you to be more receptive and wise and compassionate in all situations, rather than saying, this is the way it is, this is what's happened, that's what's going on. So
right. Well, when you meet the great masters of any tradition, really, and I would gather that probably Jesus Christ was this way as well.
Yes.
There's like a tremendous joy and like a radiating of love for all beings. You know what I mean? And there's generally a big smile that accompanies it, rather than a solemn, kind of thing. Yeah. But it's the people trying to get there that tend to be the really uptight about how to get there, It's
interesting. And so like to kind of tie this together, I've been reading this book at night on my iPhone called Beyond Death, Mind Beyond Death. It's by this guy.
Oh, I've heard that's really good. You know what? I can't believe you're saying that. I'm looking at it right now. My boyfriend must have it. That's crazy.
Yeah, synchronicity. There you go.
There you go. No, I've been sitting here looking at it during our conversation, sort of in the back of my mind going, oh yeah, wasn't I supposed to read that or something?
It's incredible. I'm about halfway through, and it is hands down the only other book I would put it up there with in terms of being like a comprehensive like manual and explication of what is going on in this state and Bardo states in general. I'd put it up there with the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying by Sogyal Rinpoche, which is just like a tome, like amazing book. But yeah, Mind Beyond Death. So this book is crazy. It's basically the intersection of so many things that I'm fascinated with, which is like dreams, dying, not in a morbid sense, but like, you know, I'm interested in traditions and, you know, groups of people who have studied this stuff for thousands of years. Like, what do they say? Like when a Tibetan Buddhist who doesn't seem like he has any reason to lie or pull a ruse on someone is like, hey, this is what happens after you die. Here's the way it goes. This is why we train in this. I'm like, okay, I'm going to read that. That interests me. Who's
it by? I'm going to just pull it off the shelf in a second and read us a random passage.
You could totally do it. I swear. It's by Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoche.
Ponlop Rinpoche. Yeah, he's amazing. I've gotten to meet him and he's really amazing.
Oh, it is one of the most in-depth and meaty Tibetan Vajrayana, just everything. He covers everything in it, but it's so down to earth. Like he talks about consciousness, you know, he uses analogies with like hard disks and data, but it's not as neuroscience-y and kind of like steeped in science as like, say, Mingyur Rinpoche's book, The Joy of Living. But it's so fucking good. But it's something that like I usually tear through books. This one, I am not. Like I read a little bit before going to sleep every night, sometimes during the day, and there's just so much in it. But why I bring it up is there's this aspect that I'm reading right now where he talks about ordinary mind, which is essentially, you know, everything, right? It's the universal consciousness. And he says the problem people make is they think they have to go somewhere else for it. So if you're in the West, you need to go to India. He's like, listen, look at Milarepa. He studied in Tibet, his hometown. He didn't go to the West and he became enlightened. And the reason is it's always with us. It's right here, even when we're angry. Conceptually, we can say, oh yeah, I know that anger is pure. And that's also, you know, Dharma. That's direct wisdom of what's going on. But when we actually get angry, and he said this and it just clicked with me, is you look for it somewhere else. You don't want to believe that inside of the anger is the pure essence of awareness and like, this is it. That's where like the realization and everything is sacred. And it's just, that is what I'm trying to get at with why I think comedians and your podcast is when you would investigate those things, I think you see that the antidote to kind of getting all freaked out about death or freaked out about, you know, emotions or difficulties in life is found in the present moment, and trying to make it about something else doesn't actually work. And that's where people get tripped up, myself included. And I think everyone included. So I think, and like, you know, look at someone like Chogyam Trungpa, who I think your parents studied with, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
He was one of the funniest people I've ever seen teach, like, or
truly funny. Oh, truly funny.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
he once was giving a transmission, like a very important transmission that everyone was kind of waiting to see like what he would say and what he would do. And he just said, fuck you, you know, and totally stopped people's minds. He had quite a great sense of humor. And he was a trickster and all of it.
I mean, it's incredible how he was, but I want to also go back to the dying thing, not to morbidly go on it, because you spoke about, there's few people who I've known friends who have had parents died. I've had my grandparents die, but I haven't been hit in the face with death, right? I haven't had someone extremely close to me. You were definitely hit in the face with it because you had a sibling die in a tragic and quick way. And I'd like, you described something and you said something that I think is really poignant. You said, you know, while my heart was broken and open, that's when I wanted to process this stuff. And there's like a famous saying, I think it's by a rabbi or something, who says, you know, the reason our hearts break is so they can crack open and let the light in. And so
that's good.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite quotes. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience is like, because I don't know a lot of people who can openly and transparently talk about this as well as I've heard you speak about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. And you said sorry to be morbid, and I say the same thing almost on like half my podcast. I'm like, sorry to be morbid. But you know what? Like, morbidity should not be, death shouldn't even be morbid. You know what I mean? It shouldn't be looked at as a bad thing. And I actually, we got hit with another death a few weeks ago in our family. My dear uncle, my auntie Kelly, who I'm named after, her husband, wonderful man named Mark Hall, died.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear
pretty suddenly from leukemia. Like literally, I was doing mezcal shots with him. Like 6 weeks later, he was dead. Wow. And I actually performed the Sukhavati ceremony, which is the Buddhist death rites, on the beach. And we talked about how death is, shouldn't be related to as something solemn necessarily, but that it's really the natural other side of the coin of birth. And we all celebrate birth and make it this sacred ceremonial thing. And then when death happens, it's just, Right. And I think that we haven't been taught in our culture how to relate to that. And there is joy in that, actually. And what's his name? There was some guy in the it was actually I think it was in the Arquette family. Maybe Alexa Arquette or something like that. This was one of the first transgender actors.
Oh yeah.
Wedding singer. What was? I don't know if I'm getting her first name correctly, but David Arquette's brother, who changed to sister, when she passed away, surrounded by her siblings, instructed everybody to cheer at the moment of death. Said, when I pass into the next realm, I want everyone to cheer for me. And they did that. And for some reason I read that and I just started crying, because it is like 3, 2, 1, blast off. You're off to another great adventure, presumably. And we just get really frozen and don't know how to talk about it. But I think there actually is a lot of wisdom in life we can gain from being open to death as, just as natural and beautiful a part of things as being born or getting married, Right.
It's so true. I mean, we have a lot of fear in death because it's the biggest question mark for everyone in life. Yep. Like, we know it's going to happen. No one has beaten that to date. So we know it's going to happen, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we can prepare for it. And I think one of the things that one of the biggest disservices that I've noticed in modern culture and just where we are is we don't, like you said, we say, well, not to be morbid. It doesn't have to be morbid, number one, but if we don't talk about dying, death, what happens, why does it happen, and how it relates to life, like you said, the other side of the coin, then we're woefully unprepared for when it actually happens. And when you read and hear people talk about what death is, it's an important thing. It's not like this little thing. It is something that like has some value towards what happens afterwards, if you believe in that. So, I mean, yeah, I wish we would talk about it more as a culture and society in ways that didn't specifically freak people out. Like, it's okay to get freaked out. It is a scary thing. No one really knows how they're going to deal with it. Even when reading about like some of the dissolutions that happen in, the way the Tibetan Buddhists view it, it can be a scary thing, but it doesn't have to be if we talk. Right.
Well, there's also this quality of liberation. So, death is to life as divorce is to marriage. I mean, no matter how good it was, like, there's always a liberation when you get freed from those karmic bonds and cycles.
It's an amazing analogy.
They're so hard to get out of, right? And there's actually a website called, I think it's called whenyoudie.com. I have to look it up. Let's see. www.whenyoudie.org, youdie.org. And the whole premise is reclaiming death.
Nice.
and basically saying this is something that needs to be, we need a way to talk about this. We need to celebrate it. We need to embrace it. And we need to take it back from, our culture, which says, look the other way, cover your ears when this kind of glaze over when the subject comes up, change the subject.
Right.
Because actually it's a big, beautiful ceremony that we need to know how to, it's like a graduation,
Right.
We need to know how to incorporate that. And by doing that, it also helps with all the little deaths that we have in our life every day. Like I'm sipping on a kombucha right now. This is my last sip. It's a little death. I'm a little sad about it.
Right.
And so preparing for the big one helps us live so much better, I think.
Well, I think it's true. And I just as an aside, like Ram Dass, for a while, wanted to do these death stores in malls. And it would basically be like a store where it's not really a funeral home, but like you go in, you learn about death and you prepare for death. And he wanted his casket to say, "Be dead now." That's pretty good, Ram Dass. I got to give it to you.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows you that it like you said, there is a playfulness for all of the people who seem to have experienced some real wisdom in their life, and that is in a way, it's important to remember that and not get so kind of tripped up about what's happening.
Yeah. And I mean, at the same time, I'm not saying that it's like that it's just a good thing. Like
Right.
It's been excruciating. I think I have PTSD from it to some extent, frankly. It's not just this beautiful, liberated, silver lining situation at all.
No, it's everything, right?
It's total trauma. Yeah. It is. It's the black and the white at the same time. But I do feel a little reborn going through this because yesterday I was traveling with my sister, and like the two of us, like the combination is just not good. It was a miracle that we made our flight. We both had so many clothes. We had so much stuff that like we both literally put on 3 layers of clothing so that her bag was not too heavy. So we're there like flying to LA. She's wearing a dress and a skirt and boots and, 2 sweaters, and it was a little bit of a shit show, and I was just getting annoyed by the whole thing.
Yeah, I know it goes.
and I just stopped and I said, you know what, this could be the last time I ever travel with my sister.
Right.
And if that was the case, I would always look back and say, remember when she was wearing 3 sweaters and a hat, and we were, the laughing stock of the plane. And I would think back on that with so much love, and all I can think right now is like, really fucking hot in all these clothes, and like I like to be earlier than this, and it really stopped and popped it for me. So that's been a blessing in all of this.
Well, it's weird. It's like it's death and dying as a mindfulness practice in and of itself. It sucks you in. There's these moments we have in life. I mean, I think they're all around us, but there's these moments where we tap into it, and something like someone dying or a birth or a major life event can just kind of crystallize and suck you back into the moment where you realize that aspect of yourself that's like, this could be the last time. What's going on now. If you're anything like me, even when you realize that in like, when you're rushing or in your line or you're driving, you realize it, and then I'm still pissed off and I'm still upset.
No, I went right back to being like, God damn it, Sophie.
But the awareness is the first step. I mean, one of the things that I think is interesting in this book too is he's talking about like, how do you prepare for death? Like, what do you do? How do you get ready for it? And he's like, listen, this is what you do. It's pretty easy. You do shunyata, you do calm abiding meditations, you do vipassana, you do insight meditations. And I'm like, shit, this is like the one thing that I don't do. Like, I've improved my life in countless ways over the past decade, in so many ways. And I've known about meditation the entire time. I've probably meditated in the past year maybe 40 times, like tops. And that's only because I'm like shamed into doing it because a teacher I work with, Sharon Salzberg, has a 28-day meditation course in February where I was a blogger. So I basically have to do it. So like those are 28 of the 40 days. And I recognize, like, we have this whole book coming out, which I know you're a part of. It's Practically Mindful is the tentative name, and it's ways to stay aware without meditating. And, you know, the little trick to the book, and I'll give it away for the listeners of this, is after that we have a book that is how to meditate, because it isn't something we want to gloss over. And
Right.
it's something that is important. I don't want to take that part away from mindfulness and being aware. The meditation, those quiet moments, whether they're comfortable or not, they're so important to kind of stabilize your consciousness and kind of actually get an accurate picture of what's going on. So I forget which episode it was, but you were talking about meditation. I know you did some silent retreats, but you were also saying you were not the best meditator at times. So you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, meditation a lot of my life has been based around meditation. My parents started meditating with us as kids when I was probably like 2 years old.
Wow.
And so I was always the one that we would start sitting and I would invariably lose it laughing. Like, talk about like just truth hitting you, just like funniest. If I could ever write a joke that makes anyone laugh to their soul the way that I would the minute the gong went off, I don't know. I just like the whole thing was hilarious. I got it. I don't think I was wrong. and so I would always get kicked out of the meditation room. Like pretty much, okay, 30 seconds have gone by, so Kelly's laughing. Okay, you can leave now. And I would feel so left out, which as the youngest, you hate to feel left out. And I remember being 5 years old one time and being so hurt because I think I did have this real affinity for the calm energy that happened and the peace that I could palpably feel in my family when we sat together. Because things were not always, very smooth and peaceful.
Sure.
My dad, it was a blended family and different ages, boys, girls. And so that was always this really sacred time to me. And I could feel something about it. I didn't get it conceptually, but I loved that feeling. So to be kicked out of there, one time I just remember feeling completely kicked in the gut and devastated. And I went out and we had another Buddha in our house, probably like 5, but there was one on the mantle, and I went and I sat by myself and I didn't move for the entire duration of the time that they practiced, which was probably about 5 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. And I remember that being my first experience of it. I really was meditating.
Wow.
It was as good as any good meditation I could do now. I was very, in some ways probably better when you're a kid because you have less habitual patterns. And I was really with the breath and I completely tuned into that space. That really it's, I think, tuning into your own heart and the goodness of your own, mind. And I really meditated with my whole heart, and my family came out and they were all shocked that I was there with perfect posture, sitting still as this little 5-year-old. So then I think I've had a play love-hate relationship with meditation ever since. Certainly more love and hate isn't even the right word.
Right. I know what you mean.
I was a super hyperactive kid. Like definitely some teachers wanted to put me on medication for it. And it was fucking hard to sit still that long.
Yeah.
I found it like physically painful to try and sit still that long.
Yeah.
But I also always loved the feeling that came from it. So there's always been this play. And I've done many, many practice programs and solitary retreats. And I've had phases where I have a pretty strong daily routine of practice.
Yeah.
But I also, in the last few years have definitely, I think, fallen out of it possibly more than ever in the last few years. And the busier you get, the harder it is to balance so many different things, which I talk about in my chapter for that book. But I do think that I've internalized a lot of it and that I'm able to just, click into that place.
Slip
when
into
I
it.
need to.
Yes, I know what you're talking about. That's hugely, hugely important because I think the more you study and the more you meditate, I know this, and I know this from teachers who do this, every day of their lives for the last 50 years. They talk about how you get to a point where everything is meditation. And the easiest bridge to this is like a walking meditation, which is not what typically someone thinks of when they think of meditating. They think, eyes closed or, lotus position, blah, blah, blah. But that is a bridge. Like when you go out into the world with a meditative outlook, it changes the way you interact and see the world. So I think that's important. Like there is a way to meditate without doing formal sitting down. That being said, I feel like there's a part of me that always is like, yeah, but don't be too clever and think that you don't have to sit for some quiet repose.
Exactly.
Right, you know?
Exactly. So like the other day I was waiting for a call and I was irritated that it hadn't come.
I know.
So it was late and I was just sort of there, anxious, and I was on a porch swing in my parents' backyard because I was in Colorado. And at some point I was like, whoa, there's a full moon. It's perfect weather. There are crickets. What are you doing, like freaking out about this phone call that could come any second? And you're in this beautiful place and you're not even enjoying it. So I just sort of dropped it and tuned into the feeling of swinging back and forth and back and forth. And, you know, that was really as good as the breath for me in that moment. I just stayed with where I was in a kind of formless meditation, and it completely, you know, was a mood interrupter. It completely shifted the wind of things and brought me back into my body. But I completely agree with you that there's no replacement for actually sitting. And I think any ability I have to do that at all is because of the however many hours of meditation that I've done, you know, my whole life since an impressionable age. And I do think if you have kids, it's great to have them sit even for a few minutes. I think Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche says starting at 8 years old, but I think it's also nice to just have them around, having grown up that way. You really internalize things through osmosis as a child, and like what better thing to absorb than just, you know, space. And I don't think it doesn't have to be like, please don't do a religious push your trip on people kind of do not, you know, force your kids
they
to
won't
do
work
with you, like ew. But you do, it is nice to include them in that sacred space, you know, and it could be prayer or whatever, but I think meditation in particular is totally non-denominational. No one can claim that meditation is Buddhist or is anything else. Like, you're just sitting there feeling yourself as a human. No one can claim that. And it's a very, you know, timeless. It's been done in so many different ways by so many different traditions.
Exactly.
But just learning and teaching a child how to just stop and be is very precious and alarmingly declining, I would say, of a practice.
I know. It's crazy. I mean, so what was I definitely want to cover this, and then I have some lightning round questions for you to flip it around. But what was it like? So your parents studied and were students of Chogyam Trungpa. How did that come about? And at what age did you kind of, you know, become aware? Obviously, you're talking about, you know, meditating with your parents, even though you're laughing at a pretty young age. Like, what was that like? Like, do you know how they got into it and how that impacted your life and all that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they got into it in different ways. They grew up in sort of different jungles. My dad was born and raised in Costa Rica, even though his name is Hector MacLean III. So very Scottish line of egomaniacs there. Like, yes, that was Hector twice. That's his first and middle name. And he grew up in Costa Rica, in Escazú, and basically was like a wild Mowgli jungle kid, like had a lot of freedom, loved the jungle. And then when the volcano erupted there, his family moved to Manhattan into a 1-bedroom apartment. And I think there was this incredible devastation that he felt from that, and loneliness. And kind of desire to reconnect with some sort of, you know, nature situation. And eventually it led him to, he went to a talk by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche in New York in what we would call the early days, in the probably early 70s. Right. And Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche had just opened, I know when you say that fast, it sounds like it's like, bless you, gesundheit. Like, but he opened a place called Tail of the Tiger. The idea being that a tiger's tail cannot be wound into a knot. It always springs open. And that's some sort of metaphor for our own basic healthiness of our minds. And he opened this land center in Vermont, and a place for people to meditate. And my dad heard one talk of his, and he was like, I'm not going to college, I'm going there. And he did eventually go back to school at Naropa, which is a university that Trungpa Rinpoche started. But he lived there for many years, and he's, totally fell in love with the Dharma. And my mother grew up in a concrete jungle of San Diego, and they were like sort of also Lord of the Flies. Like their mother was a single mother of 10 kids, and she worked her way from being the typist at the San Diego Independent newspaper to being the editor-in-chief.
Oh, wow.
So she was this amazing pioneer in journalism for women, but she was so busy trying to feed her family and get them out of the ghetto that she was not really an attentive mother. So my mom had a childhood filled with a lot of trauma. And she always felt like she had this inner voice that kind of guided her to, she was actually 12 years old. She had already tried heroin.
Wow.
Grew up sort of in a drug den, and she was going to a lot of abuse. She actually had a wonderful mother, but when she was around, but she was absent, which is not wonderful. And so she was actually going to commit suicide at the age of 12.
Jesus.
She came to a place where she was very seriously contemplating suicide, or maybe it was 13, sometime between 12 and 14. And she was going to commit, I think it was 12. She was going to commit suicide, and she was like literally about to enter the act. And she heard a voice, a female voice, saying, don't. There's, there's more that you need to find. And if you do this, you're just, if you commit suicide, you're just going to have to go through this all over again. And the voice told her to look for a guru or a teacher. And so she started at the age of, 13 or something, and started looking for a guru. And at the age of 14, her boyfriend's parents meditated and taught her how to meditate, and she loved it, and she did it on the bus, and it became sort of her savior. And then he was a student of, her boyfriend's father was a student of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, and for the opening of Naropa University, the summer of 74, he asked my grandmother, can I take Carrie and Jamie to the opening of this university? And my grandmother, who was super into spirituality, said yes. And my mom went and actually fell completely in love with Chogyam Trungpa thing. And she wanted to drop out of high school and come go to Naropa. And he told her, no, you need to finish school, but you can do it quickly. And she went back, and some sort of magic was worked that all her credits were sped up from all this extracurricular stuff she did. And she graduated at the age of 16 and moved back to Boulder.
Wow.
To be his student. So that was a long version of the story, but that's how they got together. That's how they met. And my father was one of the first kusung, which is like an attendant to Trungpa Rinpoche. That's bodyguard, attendant kind of dude. And my mother was a very close student of his as well.
That is really, really awesome. What a nice little auspicious birth for you.
Yeah, totally. I think so. I think a lot about, oh God, I really got to do something in this world. Because how many stars aligned that I was not born in Somalia to, a very difficult, impoverished, starving situation, or maybe equally bad to like the Kardashian family. I don't know.
Right.
I
Both
was
sides of the spectrum.
Of extremes. Really good people. And you know what? They have their issues, and there's like a lot of stuff.
Of course.
If you go to the Dharma, you probably like comedy. It's probably because there's a lot of pain there,
It's true. And I mean, it's one of those things that once you kind of get onto any path like this, I don't even love the word the path, but once you kind of open your awareness and tune into this stuff, shit's going to happen. Like it's not going to pass undetected anymore. The ignorance is kind of gone of what's going on. Not all of it, obviously, but yeah, you tune in and stuff happens. I've had many experiences like that. And I also consider I was born into a great family. I have wonderful parents. They're divorced now, but I mean, really individually wonderful people. And I've just had a really great life. And I think of the same things, like, this is, a very precious thing, and, you want to make something of it. So with that, I want to go in to the reverse lightning round questions, which is you ask on your podcast. Yeah, because I hear you ask these questions to everyone. I'm like, I wonder what Kelly's answers would be.
Nobody's asked me. Nobody has.
Here you go.
Oh, shit. You might expose me as a fraud. I haven't got anything.
So, okay, here we go. Do you believe in God or a higher power or something like that?
As a Buddhist, I would say, obviously, that's a dumb question, Noah. Why even ask? No. But, and, talking to all these comedians has really helped with this. I would say, yeah, on some level, I do. I do not believe in one person, any sort of an entity with an ego. The way we talk about gods very often, especially if you think of like Greek gods or Roman gods, there's these massive egos that are so enticing. Yes. But I believe in a force within the universe that you can really communicate to. And I believe that it gives us little signs. I love that your podcast is called Synchronicity, because what I look, if I'm theistic in any way, what I sort of have allegiance to or consider having like a higher power than me is that force in the universe that makes accidents happen in a particular way, that makes funny little winks at you, where there's just no way that I'll use the example of, I think part of this my podcast also came out of this great show called The Goddamn Comedy Jam, and these guys have comedians do music, and that was part of like, oh yeah, and then comedians doing something that's not comedy is really interesting. And then I had that idea, and then I happened to be seated on the plane next to those guys, same flight home, seated next to each other. I'd literally driven to the airport with them, and I was just like, you know what, there's something there.
Right.
And actually half my great guests have come from their show. The guy that they helped me write the jingle for my podcast. And it was like, I just knew that there was some reason I kept running into these dudes and that I was next to them on the plane. And actually, the more I explored that, like the more blessings came out of that situation. Mm-hmm. So that's not like probably the biggest moment of synchronicity I could point to, but those moments to me prove that there is something that's very alive out there that is in some way watching.
Right. It's weird that you describe this too, because I very much align myself with a lot of the Buddhist teachings that are essentially, no Godhead per se. Like even the Buddha he's the one who is awake. That's what that means. It doesn't mean he's God. But I also have too many direct experiences in my life that there's something going on, whether that's my consciousness interacting with the consciousness of everyone else and the collective unconscious. I don't know, but there's something going on. And I think I'd be like pretty ballsy to be like, nah, definitely not. So I love that answer. So well, I agree. No Godhead. And the important point to put here, and this is the twist on, you couldn't also say like, yes, I believe in God the way we think of it, because I don't believe it's any separate from myself. Right. I don't believe it's any separate from you or Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or whomever. That's right.
ISIS. That's all expressions of the same force of energy that I'm talking about. So it's also God, they say, comes from the word good, and so I do believe in a force of goodness in the world. So that is to say, I am God.
Yeah, of course. That's what we were getting at. Of course,
God, and it's me.
I love that. So next question. These are your questions. Have you experienced God?
Yeah, I mean, I think that my story of that guy is an experience of that. But let me think. Yeah, I think I experience God when I really allow my intuition to speak to me, and you just know that something is right no matter how it looks from the outside. You follow that gut pull, and then it turns into a whole wonderful bouquet that you never would have been able to, design yourself.
It's weird how when that happens, and it's not always easy to listen to your intuition and tap into the flow or whatever that is. But when you do, we'll get to another question that kind of ties into that. These are your questions, but I totally agree. Loving these answers. So what happens after you die?
I think that you're like, what the fuck just happened? I think that some part of you is still there going, I don't think that it blips out of existence when you die.
Yeah.
Because I don't see anything in the universe that just disappears. When you burn something, it becomes smoke. It becomes part of the air. We breathe it,
Yeah.
I think maybe those ashes go into the soil and they, then become some nutrients that are part of a tree, I don't see any proof that you can make anything completely go away. You eat something, you shit it out. So I hope that it is not being shit out by life at the end. But I do think
so death is the butthole, the ethereal butthole of life.
That's what happens. But no, I think that we must come back in some form. Yeah. And I'm inclined to say reincarnation. I've had moments where I have physically felt like maybe it had a flashback to having a penis.
Yeah.
And like knowing physically what it feels like to be a man and like have a mustache and like, I don't know, I wasn't on drugs. Like, I don't know where that would have come from,
Yeah. I'll relay a weird thing that, I have also vivid flashbacks or intuitions that I was a woman in some past life, maybe the most recent one. And it's this crystallized intensely when our son was born. I wasn't supposed to help with the birth at all, but because they were like short staff on nurses, because I was like freaked out. I was like, nah, it's going to be weird. I don't want to do it. Blah, blah. But I totally clicked in. It was like, I was like a birthing partner. I was like helping her push. I was lifting her leg.
Did you have any sympathy pains?
So many. You have no idea.
Cancer is the mother of the zodiac, I bet.
Yeah. So I definitely had a ton of sympathy pains. And then also when he was born, after that first week, which is it's the craziest fucking, it's like being on drugs. You're not getting sleep. It's totally nuts. But I was like naturally, without intellectualizing anything, like incredibly good with him. And like it felt like I had done this before and had like a motherly connection to it. So I totally know what you mean. It's like weird when you say, I think I might have had a penis in a past life and I know what it feels like. Or I'm like, yeah, I know what it's like to be a mom. But you wouldn't say it if you didn't feel it. It's certainly not something you would invent to say to anyone. So
right, absolutely. You would not be like, yeah, I know, I have the mom thing down.
Yeah.
And then I see people come in with these extraordinary talents that some could say God-given talents, but I think they're talents that they know how to do. Like I just knew how to write when I came out, and even performing has been something I've really had to learn how to do.
Right.
Writing, I had a teacher in 4th grade call me and say like, did someone help you write this? Like it was, I just knew how to do that somehow.
Yeah.
And that's probably my only talent, which is why I bring it up.
Well,
I came in with very naturally and didn't have to like beat out of myself.
Well, and I'll say this, just like I was reading some of your stuff on Huffington Post. You are an excellent writer. So like the mark of a good writer to me, and at least I can tell what good writing is someone who can speak in their own voice that doesn't feel like someone else, but also feels very natural as though they're speaking to you. And you do that perfectly. I mean, I was reading your thing about the LA parking tickets when you described the totem. Oh,
thank you.
It's really funny. It's really awesome and right on point too.
I'm glad you read that one. That one didn't get as many reads as other ones, and I probably believe in it more passionately than anything. Fuck you, LA Park Hero.
I know the feeling. I know.
My message for the world.
Oh man. Okay, moving on to the next question.
Yeah.
What is the meaning of life?
This one's hard, and it's good you're doing this because now I feel bad for doing this to you.
I'm putting it, deflecting it back at you. Yeah.
Yeah. I think sex has got to be up there, right? That's part of it.
It's definitely
It's
up
got to
there.
be part of it. No, I think this sounds weird, but I think just to live, like without overthinking it too much, just to burn really fully as brightly and feel and experience what is here. And I think love is kind of at the center of that,
I agree.
and just to fully experience that, whatever that God or basic goodness nature is, to fully experience that unity with the whole world. I think that basically, I think you could say the meaning of life is art, is another way of putting it. It's like, well, there is no meaning to a beautiful work of art that someone does necessarily.
Right.
It might be a very abstract thing, but the fact that it exists, even if it's like a sand mandala then thrown to the wind,
Right.
the fact that it exists just means so much.
That's a really awesome answer.
Thank you. I think I have to think about it more.
It's such an easy question. I'm surprised you didn't just rattle it off right at the beginning. So easy. What's the meaning of life? Yeah. All right. Next question. What is magic?
Well, I think magic is the fact that I was sitting here having this conversation with you, staring at the Mind Beyond Death book, and then you said, this great book, Mind Beyond Death. But the magic that it took me like 3 minutes to realize, I'm looking at that book.
I'm staring right at it.
But that kind of synchronicity, as is the name of your podcast, it's when time and space bend so that two minds or many minds or things actually connect beyond all likelihood.
That's like the best answer I've ever heard. Seriously, that is, and what you're describing is something that is, it's easy to experience it. When I said like you can have that experience, but to put it into words like that is really, really, like you're definitely a good writer because that is a really eloquent way of describing a phenomena that I'm well versed in and I think everyone has experienced on some level. So awesome job.
Well, thank you. Can I flip it back on you? Because I'm so curious. It's my favorite question to ask people. What is magic?
Yeah. I will. So I've experienced magic a lot in my life, and it's something I would describe as that it is outside the known concept and laws of the world as we like to think of them. And I think this has a lot to do with kind of how we like to think of ourselves as people. So we like to think that, I'm Noah, I'm Kelly, I'm this person, I do this is what I do. But when you really reflect back on that, whether through meditation or psychedelics, that's not a really solid entity. It doesn't actually exist. So that, in the context of that, magic is possible at any time, because if something doesn't actually exist, it can be literally occurring at any time. That possibility or the potential for it is there. But what I think magic is in our regular perception of life is when something pierces the veil of how we expect or think things should go.
Yes.
And I think it's something that you can actually cultivate. It's something that is also elusive. If you try to make magical situations all of the time, I don't think it works. It's something you can't, it's this lightness, it's this open-handedness. You don't want to grasp onto it and you don't want to let it slip through your fingers. So if you can kind of get into that wavelength or vibration, you can promote synchronicities, you can promote magic. But yeah, I mean, that's what I guess I think it is. It's this thing that it's the piercing of the veil of how we expect regular consensus reality to go. That's what I think magic is.
I love that. Piercing of the veil. Okay, you should write that book.
Okay, last question. Nice little flip. Nice judo flip. Okay, what is love?
I think love is the unseen network that connects all of us. It's almost like the ocean, the energetic ocean that we all are. And we all are little drops in, and that ocean may be perverted in some places. Maybe it's completely, that love is, maybe it's completely frozen on one part of the earth, and inaccessible, and doesn't even know that it's water because it's still, and it doesn't feel like the water that it sees, and sometimes maybe even some of that water evaporates and is seemingly gone before it rains back down. But I think that love is that ocean of energy that is inseparably all of us.
Wow.
Just to sound really fucking hippie.
Well, you did, but it's so good. And like, here's the thing, and I know you're realizing now that you ask these questions and it's like not the easiest thing to answer, but what's so great about these questions is you really get to see what people are made of and how they view whatever it is we're experiencing. And that's really well done. And I love this theme that you have reinforced through this, which things don't leave. They may be transmuted or turned into something else for a little bit, but there is this recycling and there is this cycle of things that happen. I love that. Okay, so I now have my quick little questions. They're not as hard as yours.
God.
Here we go. What's your favorite color?
Ooh, rainbow sparkles. Rainbow light. That's my answer.
That's a great answer. What's your favorite number?
69. I got a credit card with my boyfriend and I got our first like joint finance situation on the back of our credit cards. I don't know why I'm telling you guys that my credit card number. That's right. But it's the secret code on the back is 069.
Hey.
Tune into the next podcast to hear the other.
Yeah, just we'll do the reveal.
The expiration date next month. No, but I loved that. I was like, that's a great sign.
That's awesome. It's also 69 is the sign for Cancer.
It is, yeah. It's just kind of a beautiful sort of mirror image cyclical thing.
Yeah, it's cool. What is your favorite animal?
I couldn't choose one, but I will say that I connect very intensely to the bald eagle, not just because I'm American.
Yeah, America.
But I've just had a lot of sort of interesting run-ins with bald eagles, and if they do appear, sometimes I'll take it as a sign of synchronicity because they're just an animal that has sort of shown up for me in really interesting ways and moments. So if I ever see one, I feel like it's seeing like a shooting star or something.
So it's interesting.
I always feel like it's the universe like communicating to me.
It's really interesting you mentioned that because in a previous podcast I did, my friend Mikey, who's a comedian in LA, his dad, he recommended he come on the show. And in the episode he did it, he was actually talking about synchronicity and used the example, I think, of an eagle. Like if you're going for a job interview and you identify with an eagle and you see it on like a painting, don't worry, relax, you're going to get the job.
Right.
That's really interesting. All right. Last question. Can you share a practical tip that has helped you in your life?
Yes. Is there any specific, like practical tip for like how I, wash my car or like is there anything that is
tip? Literally any tip.
Okay. Well, I just to plug the book, I talk about this in the chapter that I wrote for what's it going to be called?
We're tentatively calling it Practically Mindful.
Practically mindful. Yeah. So a practical tip that I have, and this has been like sort of my own secret practice or religion or cult of one, is kind of based on what I was talking about with the universe winking at you or giving you little signs. And so Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche had a student who said, should I go to India? He probably had lots of students that said that. Should I go to India and move there, or should I stay here? And he said, in front of this assembly of people, he said, follow the accidents. And he didn't say like, oh, India's great, you'll be so much more spiritual. And he didn't say, oh, don't go, something bad's going to happen. He just said, follow the accidents. And so I think there is sometimes a misconception that the universe is like one-dimensional and that you're doing things to it and moving through it.
Right.
And making it what you want, which, in some ways is true, but it's so much more of an alive conversation. And I think if you just really listen, the more you listen and the more you look, the more you'll see little things happening, little signs and little winks and, little arrows going, like, maybe go that way.
Yeah.
And so my tip would be, look for those, listen to them, and when an odd little coincidence happens and you run into the same person for the third time, maybe go have coffee with them and just see what is, there's some energy that wants to play itself out here. I'm just going to see what it is.
Yeah. There's a quote by Carl Jung, which is, synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see. And
I love that.
That pretty much is kind of what you're talking about. Just be aware of these things going on and try to follow them when you can. Kelly, thank you. I'm so glad this came together in this auspicious eclipsey type of period. This is really awesome. Thank you so much.
This was fantastic. Thank you so much. If you ever have like a podcast guest cancel and it's the 11th hour,
totally.
Just call me up and we'll do it again. This was super fun.
I totally will. Awesome. So this is a song I've been working on for a little bit in the past week. I'm really liking the way it's shaping up. I haven't been making a lot of music, so it was nice to make this and something I like. Hopefully I still like it in a week. I'm trying to get good about making stuff for every episode. So for the people who listen past that and to that, thank you. And also how excellent of an episode and how excellent of a person is Kelly, right? I'm sure she'll be back on. Definitely check out her podcast, the Tao of Comedy. There's many locations you can find it. You can find it on iTunes, you can find it on Stitcher, you can find it all of your favorite places. On the web, if you're into that type of thing, you just want to type it into your phone or your browser, you can go to mindpodnetwork.com/Kelly. You can also go to DaoPodcast.com, and that's Tao with a T. TAO podcast.com. Really, thank you guys so much for listening past the music, for listening every week. We're coming up on 50 episodes here, which is kind of mind-blowing. 52 will be a year exactly because I don't think I've missed a week. So thank you for listening, and I will see you next week. Go Dolphins.
Miami has the Dolphins, the greatest football team. We take the ball from goal to goal like no one's ever seen. We're in the air, we're on the ground, we're always in control. And when you say Miami, you're talking Super Bowl, 'cause we're the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins #1. Yes, we're the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins #1. Miami has the Dolphins, the greatest football team. We take the ball from goal to goal like no one's ever seen. We're in the air, we're on the ground, we're always in control. And when you say Miami, you're talking Super Bowl, 'cause we're the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins #1. Yes, we're the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins #1. Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins #1. Yes, we're the Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins #1. Yes, we're the